Okay. So we're going to start the Parsha overview, which is, let's see, I'll bring this up. Just a, a general perspective of the Parsha. And we're going to zero in on one specific element that is, it's there in the Torah Parsha. It's not an obscure detail, but it's a detail. So let's just go over the whole thing. Our overview. 150. Jacob settles in Hebron with his 12 sons. Yesterday's Torah reading, we had Jacob coming back to Israel after decades away. Now he's got a family, he's got a business, he settles, he manages with his twin brother, and now he settles down in Israel. He goes to Hebron. From his 12 sons and one daughter, his favorite is 17-year-old Joseph, whose brothers are jealous of the preferential treatment he receives from his father. This is a pretty well-known story. It captured my imagination as a kid, still does. Such as a precious good morning, Granadi, welcome back. Many colored coat that Jacob makes for Joseph. We're on page 150. Joseph relates to his brothers two of his dreams. In other words, he relays, he tells over two of his dreams, which foretell that he's destined to rule over them, increasing their envy and hatred toward him. So they don't really like him too much. And he doesn't help his situation because he doesn't make himself so likable. Shimon and Levi, two of his brothers, plot to kill him. But Reuven suggests that they throw him into a pit instead, intending to come back later and save him. So his brothers actually want to kill him, right? Family needs plenty of therapy. While Joseph is in the pit, Judah has him sold to a band of passing Ishmaelites. The brothers dip Joseph's special coat in the blood of a goat and show it to the father, Jacob, leading him to believe that his most beloved son has been devoured by a wild beast. Meanwhile, Joseph is gone. Jacob thinks he's dead. The boys know what happened, but he's gone because they don't know where he went. They just sold him, and the caravan took him somewhere. Judah marries and has three children. The eldest is named He dies young and childless, and his wife Tamar is given in levirate marriage to the second son Onan. Onan sins by spilling his seed, and he too meets an early death. Judah sees her as a black widow and is reluctant to have his third son marry her, even though the practice would be that now the third son steps up to take care of the wife. Determined to have a child from Judah's family, Tamar disguises, as our rabbis told us, she had this spiritual inspiration. She's going to bear a child, and she is, in fact, the forebear of King David. But she knew she was supposed to have children of Jacob's lineage. She disguises herself as a prostitute and seduces Judah himself. Can't make this stuff up. Judah hears that his daughter-in-law has become pregnant and orders her executed for harlotry. When Tamar produces some personal effects he left her as a pledge for payment, he publicly admits that he's the father. Tamar gives birth to twins, Peretz, an ancestor of King David, and Zerach. Joseph is taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, the minister. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Joseph has been taken to Egypt. He's sold to Potiphar, the minister in charge of Pharaoh's slaughterhouses, the chief butcher. God blesses everything he does, and soon he's made overseer of all his master's property. Potiphar's wife desires the handsome and charismatic lad. When Joseph rejects her advances, she tells her husband that the Hebrew slave tried to force himself on her and has him thrown into prison. Joseph gains the trust and admiration of his jailers, who appoint him to a position of authority in the prison administration. So the Torah goes through, starts with the family in Hebron. There's trouble in the family. Joseph gets sold down to Egypt, and the Torah portion ends because, and this is a saga that will, this story itself will take 3 to 4 Torah portions. In this, the one itself, he ends up, when we close this week's Torah portion, he is in prison. Now, the topic that chosen to speak about today is the idea of success, because Joseph is described twice in this week's Torah portion as a person who had success. And it's clear from the Torah, it was God-given success. Now, so this is going to be an analysis. We all live lives, and we all have aspirations, and we all know success, and we all know not success. Nobody bats 1,000. But we're going to look at a spiritual perspective on success. I, I believe it said that Seneca said that success is where either preparation and luck or preparation and opportunity meet. In other words, preparation means I have to invest. If I have an important job interview, I have a meeting with a client, I have a presentation before a board or before investors, I've got to do my due diligence. But it's not. We all know that you don't fully control the variables. We don't control the variables for making a presentation to someone. I don't. I can make a great presentation. Nobody's perfect, but I can make a really great presentation. It doesn't make a difference that they're going to hear it in the right way. It doesn't mean maybe, who knows, they didn't sleep well that night, or maybe they just don't see things the way I see it. You can't. Success is not within our hands. If you want to play it very safe, there's going to be, there's not going to be too much reward because ultimately we're trying our best and with what's in our control, but there's stuff out of our hands. So if Seneca's thing was where preparation means opportunity, opportunities come up. I mean, I've known a good number of very materially, financially successful people, and in a way where we get into good conversations. No one really thinks that they created all their opportunities. It's forget about what family they're born into, but even if not, you met someone. It didn't have to happen that way. You knew someone in that company. There are opportunities that are natural. We can call them luck. And the idea is to notice opportunities, be prepared for opportunities, and capitalize on opportunities. So what we call luck, conceptually, a believing person calls God, blessing. So in that way, the Torah will say that success is the intersection between our personal effort or preparation and blessing. And it's very important for us, just like we want to be open to opportunities, not thinking about the godly part of it, but that when we're God focused, we want to keep ourselves open to godly blessing, because we recognize that in our life's endeavors, and everybody has something that they're looking for, success is going to be this blend. Have a good attorney, doctor, good preparation, do all of that, but then the actualizing and accomplishing the success, the mazel, that we turn to God. So now let's take a look. Sure.
Um, what can we infer by the fact there's this repeating theme that the younger child becomes the leader?
So first, so he was not. That's a great question. He was not the youngest.
But
He's definitely younger. He's definitely from the younger. Yeah, he's from the youngest.
So did Jacob and Abraham.
Yes, I think that there is, and Isaac and Ishmael also. I think that there are, and King David was not. It was from the least likely of his brothers. And King Solomon was not the first either, although the first one died. But I think that there's a lot. If you look at the scope of what we're told about Jewish history, there's a lesson there that you can't take success for granted, and it's not just inherited. And if you look at the Mashiach, has a very, very tainted lineage. I mean, we just said about Tamar, this Jacob's daughter-in-law, dresses up like a prostitute for a quickie on the side of the road. One of the kids born from that is the grandparent of King David, and ultimately the grandparent of the Mashiach. I think there is a consistent theme is that if you were born on third base, so to speak, recognize it and don't imagine that means you're getting home. Somebody on first now can come around. So there is this idea of that nobody's out of the game by virtue of their birth or their circumstances, and no one should take the success for granted by virtue of their circumstances. And I think the older, and especially in the ancient world, where the older one was like, the heir to the kingdom, say, not so fast. Yeah.
Okay. Before we get into the rest of the lesson,
Yeah.
One of the questions that's been bugging me for the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if I can.
Hebron
Yeah.
is sort of the natal location of the Jews. Did the word Hebrew derive from Hebron or from Ivri or Habiru?
No. Hebron is a different word. Hebron means like connection. So it's not that. No, it's not that. But it's a good question. But it's one of those places where the Torah tells us explicitly that Abraham bought it from the Canaanites. Okay. At least the burial place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's look at Joseph and Joseph's rise so we can try to understand a little bit more about the Torah perspective on achieving success. Okay, text one. This is from the Torah portion. So it says here, right, Joseph had been sold, and now the Torah portion pivots away from him, just he was going on back home. Now we say, what happened? Now it comes back to Joseph. So what happened? He was sold to a caravan, and what happened? So Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, it tells us. And Potiphar, Pharaoh's chamberlain, chief of the butchers, an Egyptian man, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. God was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that God was with him. Whatever Joseph did, God made prosper in his hand. So these two words tell us that Joseph was successful. He was a servant, but he had it all together. And he did well. And his master saw that he did well. But the way is, he said, he did well, but God blessed him. And there are times you can look at someone and say, they're doing the work. They're soliciting the business, they're making the presentations, but the guys, it's the wind is at their back. They're doing well. They're lucky, or whatever. They have a charm, or whatever you say. But it's something where it isn't necessarily so predictable. Here we say it was clear even to the master that this was something in a kind of unusual success. Not that it was miraculous, that that it was supernatural, but there's a law of averages, and he just did very well. Number 4, Joseph found favor in his eyes, and Joseph served him, and Potiphar appointed him over his house, and all he had he gave into his hand. Now it came to pass that since he had appointed him over his house and over all that he had, God blessed the house of the Egyptian for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of God was in all that he had, and in the house and in the field. So this guy, he struck gold with Joseph. He was a keeper. He was doing well in the house, and the whole enterprise was doing very well. So he left all that he had in Joseph's hands. He knew nothing about what was with him except the bread that he ate. And Joseph had handsome features and a beautiful complexion. And we're going to get the beauty gets him into trouble later because the wife tries to seduce him, but we're not up to that yet. It's a side piece of it. The main thing is the success that we say that he was doing, but God was with him. Now let's go to text 2. This is from Don Yitzchak Abarbanel, Spanish great. So this is what it means when it says that Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's house. What does that mean? He abandoned his business. It says that literally Potiphar stopped keeping track entirely. That he trusted this was someone he knew was going to do well and whose integrity he could trust. That's the meaning of he knew nothing about what was with him. Early it says Potiphar appointed him over his house, and all that he had he gave into his hand, meaning he entrusted him managing the storage and resources, but he still kept tabs and expected regular reports because that's what a business person does. But once Potiphar saw Joseph's success and integrity, he gave up all oversight. Potiphar no longer required any accounting of Joseph. It went that far. So his success was recognized even by the Egyptian that this was kind of, call it luck, call it divine blessing, but he knew something was special about this young man. Now let's go to text 3. He is, well, before we get to text 3, just I had said that his wife tried to seduce him, and we said in the overview, and then when he turns down her seduction, she tells her husband, this guy, he tried to attack me. Started all the way back then, and he ends up in jail. And they're in jail. He also starts. He's he's magnetic, and the inmate is started like running the jail. God was with Joseph. He extended charisma to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the warden of the prison. So the prison warden delivered all the prisoners who were in the prison to Joseph's hand, and whatever they did there, Joseph was the one who did it. The prison warden did not expect anything that was in Joseph's hand, for God was with him. And whatever he did, God was successful. Now, that's not really a good translation. God was successful, because obviously he was successful. But the reason they put this kind of lopsided translation in is because the Torah doesn't mention Joseph. If you want to translate it right, so it should make sense, say God made him successful, but it doesn't say him. In other words, God was giving success through him. And that's what we want to focus on. It talks about Joseph being successful because of God's blessing. But once it's about him doing the work and God blessing his work. The next time, it's though God's just working through him. It doesn't even mention him. Obviously, if I'm translating this for someone, or if you look in how it's translated, it says, we'll say God made him successful, because that's what the context means. But it actually, in the words, it doesn't say that. It would say God made success. So we want to talk about different ways of how we can be open to God's blessing and success. But let's start with this. Text 4a. There's a verse in Proverbs. It says, God's blessing will bring riches, and toil will add nothing to it. King Solomon says, of course, Torah believes, and we're going to talk about it here also, Torah does not believe that by praying to God, you're all of a sudden going to get, a lump of gold coming through the chimney. We have to work. But what he's saying is that what King Solomon is saying is, once you have created the avenue for success, and God is granting success, all of your machinations are not adding anything. You did it, and now it's the success. So you're doing what you got to do, but the success is not coming from you. Don't delude yourself into thinking, oh, it's because of my good looks or the letters I wrote. All of those are important functions, but to see that ultimately the success comes from God, and my toil, while it's important in creating the conduit for blessing, it's ultimately not the source of the blessing. And 4b, we have a commentary on this verse. It says God's blessing, and this rabbi says success comes directly from God. When God gives his blessing, it brings true wealth to a person. It means financial wealth, but our successes don't only mean wealth. A success in health, a success in attitude, a success in relationships. There are a lot of things we need success in. We need to work on those and set ourselves up for success, but ultimately success is the blessing of God. And with that blessing, there's no need for added toil or stress to chase after more. The blessing itself is enough. In other words, when we see God is blessing us, we should keep that going, but recognize that it's not just about me doing, it's about me being open and recognizing the success. And that's important. And here there's a verse. Actually, I'll just go back for a second. The next text is a verse that talks about having a a, uh, a servant at the homestead. So you'd have normal day laborers, and then there's the idea of someone who would make themselves like an indentured. They need the money, make themselves like maybe what we would call it. It's not an indentured servant because they weren't indentured, but that they made themselves a committed servant, and the maximum was 6 years. So there, they got a lot of work out of that person because, and we're going to say like figuratively twice the amount because it's not a day laborer. They're living on the planet on the I don't want to say the plantation at the homestead. So the verse uses this language. Even though after 6 years you have to let them go, it says, "You shall not be troubled when you send them free for you. For twice as much as a regular hired servant, he has served you 6 years, and God will bless you in all that you do." And in other words, God blesses you. You have a business, you have this guy, he was helpful, and he's leaving now. You got to find someone else to be wrecked. But God, by doing the right thing, God will bless you in all that you do. All that you do, the Medrash focuses on that. It says a believing person might think that perhaps we can sit around all day and do nothing. I'm praying, God, I'm asking. Who says I have to look at the want ads? Why do I have to show up my job? God, you've got all the wealth. So this, our rabbis in the Medrash tell us, the verse adds in all that you do. You have to do. God says, God, that will be God's blessing, but you have to. So God sends blessing through our actions. We need to be partners with God in the success. So if I have any endeavor, it's a human resources endeavor, whatever it may be, I have the Torah responsibility to speak to a coach or to a lawyer or to do my due diligence and figure out the best way to do it. Then to recognize, God, I'm trying to do your work. Help me. I look to God to bless my efforts with success. I can't just rely on the blessing. But what this is about is we can't just rely on ourselves and see ourselves with success, beat my chest and say, that was pretty good. I pat myself on the back. I did that. I was a partner there. But I have to recognize that without God, my efforts, it's not up to me. My efforts are not going to define success. They create a fertile ground for success, but ultimately God gives us the blessing. So here, this is from the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he puts it this way on page 158, text 6. Crops grow through the sun and the moon, but these are only messengers of divine influence. They have no power to help or harm on their own. They function only by God's will. Obviously, we need a sun and we need a moon, but God is sending us light and blessing through the sun and the moon. The same is true of work and livelihood. The job is only a garment, a vehicle. The actual sustenance comes from God. So this is a mindset that we need to find a job. We need to position ourselves. We need to speak to a financial advisor. But ultimately, the success in what we're trying to do is to turn to God and say, I'm looking for your help. A Jew never sees the business itself as a source of income. He or she knows with certainty that it's God who provides. And the business is just the channel through which the blessing comes. So when we have an endeavor, we plan, and then we turn to God. Say, help me out here. Because I think a person who has an accurate view of themselves will always have to admit that they don't hold all the cards. They can't determine success. They can do a good job, but they can't determine success. And therefore, when it's successful, So thank God. And before it's successful, we turn to God and say, no, it's not just about me. I need you. And I want your presence in my life and your blessing. So let's look at text 7, which is on page 159. The idea of what's called in Hebrew hatzlacha, success, is well known. It's from a great rabbi of the 1200s. It means that good things are set in motion and reach a person smoothly without delay or obstruction. Success means even it's not only that we got what we wanted, it went smoothly. That's what we're talking about. Minimum of aggravation. We set out on a project and it worked. A similar usage appears in the verse, and they crossed the Jordan before the king. In the verse of Samuel, the language of Itzalchu, it means, doesn't only mean they crossed successfully, but crossing meaning they cleared the way and passed through it as if they split it open. In other words, an easy passing. That was called the language of a successful passing. So when we turn to God and we're looking for something, it's not only that we end up where we want to end up, but we do it with a minimum of aggravation. That it works. And here from the third Levavashah, he says, one could say that Hatzlacha, meaning success, is related to Mazel. What is Mazel? Mazel is in Jewish thinking, we use the term Mazel Tov, and we use the term for Mazel for luck. But Mazel is actually, if you look at it in how the Talmud uses it, Jewish spirituality uses it, Mazel is a core of our soul. It's called Mazel. And we get flow from God through the core of our soul. And it's flow, so hopefully that's God's blessing. So Hatzlach is related to Mazel. That's why a successful person we call a Mazel, a person of Mazel, a bar Mazel, or in Yiddish, glicklich, or a glick. They're luck. They're people who have Mazel, who have luck. This reflects the quality of Joseph. Joseph represents a level that transcends logic and calculation. His root is from a place beyond the grasp of reason, and that's the essence of true success. The third of the Bible here is pointing out something else also. When someone has a knack for something, you say they do well with this. It means that sometimes we can't draw a direct correlation between them and the success. There it goes. They're good at it. But it doesn't mean you can always see how, and I know I've seen in my life, you can't look at someone, meet them and say, oh, I can understand how they got to success. Sometimes you think you can. Sometimes it is what it is. People with a better personality, more set up, they're not making it. And someone who seems like a little bit of a shemazel, but they're doing okay. There's mazel, it comes from a place in us and within the divine, which is from beyond reason. It's God's blessing. God wants to bless us. Now, what's the reason? Can't always know. But the idea is we try to align ourselves to be open to God's blessing. Yeah, use the analogy: if someone is pouring fine wine for me, I need to have my cup in the right place, or else they could be pouring the wine, but I'm not going to be able to benefit from it because I don't have the cup in the right place. In our lives, we want to align ourselves for God's blessing. I want to lead lives of integrity, of goodness, and of loyalty to our Jewish, to our soul, to our Jewish identity. We put a mezuzah on the door. Put a mezuzah on the door because Hashem says, the Torah says so. But it's certainly believed, and I think I've seen it more than once in my life, that it helps position the building or the house for God's blessing. Left to our own devices, there's the law of statistics. Some things work, some things don't work. Everybody's got their share of things that don't work well. The mezuzahs help to bring God's protection, that to minimize that and to funnel more. And I'm just using the mezuzah as an example. It's any mitzvah, it's about our alignment and recognizing God. One in the Torah, there's two places where the scripture spells out like frighteningly negative consequences that can happen to us as a people from, disconnecting from God. Really, not pleasant. And the Torah reader always, no one else gets that lead. The Torah reader has to take it. Those are mine, because they're just really they're nasty. They're very unpleasant. But one of the things as a kid, even as I was growing up, and look, there's a word that's used again and again there, describing the Jewish attitude that God finds offensive. The Hebrew was ker. So I can read Hebrew, and I understand. Even as a kid, I'm looking. Okay, so I went to look at an English chumash because I'm like, what is keri? What's so bad that we're doing? Because wasn't familiar to me as a Hebrew word. And then I saw how it's translated. I understand why it's translated that way. It's being casual. Now, I like casual. What's wrong with being casual? Casual can mean, what happens if someone special to you goes out of their way and does something special for you, and you walk in and you see it, and you say, "Oh, that's nice," and keep walking. That's casual. It's offensive. You want to. What God is saying is, appreciate me. Don't take me for granted. Don't say, "Oh, I woke up in the morning. Why not? My vitals are good. Why shouldn't I wake up? The sun is up. Of course, the sun comes up every morning. Wake up in the morning. We say, thank you, God, for another day. My business is running successfully. Don't just say, well, yes, because I set it up right and I'm doing things well and I have a good staff. Then what that is being casual or blind to God's input. No one likes to be invisible with a human condition. And I'm not saying God doesn't have an ego here, but God's saying the whole point of the exercise of life is for you to recognize me, appreciate me, acknowledge me. And that's really at the heart of all this. Let's look at text 9 from the previous Rebbe. Hatzlacha, success, is a kind of success that comes from mazel, something higher than logic. It shows up not only in spiritual matters, but in business, home life, work in the field. As the sages say, a person never really knows which effort will bring profit. There's no question about it. That you do things. Many of the things that I thought I was going to do, I sat back in this enterprise and I made plans and I did all that, went nowhere. And the successes hit me in the back of the head. Opportunities that, it's. I remember when we bought this piece of property, which was its own crazy story. And I was like, it was 1994, so I was 26 years old. And I went I was in Crown Heights, and I spoke to a teacher of mine who was the head of the Crown Heights rabbinical court, but I was close with him. He's passed away since, and I used to speak to him, and he used to get a kick about what I was doing here. And I told him, it's amazing. Now we own a piece of property, 3.5 acres. I didn't even have a credit card. So he said to me, it's a big shul there. It's called 770. He said, you can go to the back of the shul, put your foot up on a bench and swing your keys and make yourself into a really cool guy. He said, that you and I know this thing just fell into your lap. This is just a blessing. He was right. Because I told him the truth about what will happen. There's something. These things happen. Sometimes we're following a path, but the opportunities come to us. We see this all the time. Some people make choices that seem completely unreasonable, yet everything turns out better than expected. Others follow every rule, plan with care, think through each step, and still come up short. Real success flows from a place beyond reason. So now, we're going to go now into Joseph. And Joseph's journey towards an attitude of being open to success. Because remember, first it says that his actions were blessed by God. Then it says God succeeded through his actions, which aren't even mentioned in the Torah. So here what wants to bring before we go to text 10a, there is the idea in Jewish law that sometimes, even when we do something, it's not really us. For example, in Jewish law, God forbid I'm driving. Someone slams into me from behind, and my car now skids into another car. Am I responsible? I was just driving. I was pushed into the other car or into a parked car. In Jewish law, for sure, and I would imagine secular law. So I'm obviously we have insurance, but I'm absolved. There was no negligence. No, so someone literally came, or a truck came and pushed me into something. In Jewish law in general, when we're forced to do something, and it's not voluntarily, it's not that we're absolved both from God and from human law because someone else acted with using us as a tool. It wasn't our volition. So we're going to go there and then come back to the success. Here, what the Talmud says, that God exempts one who's coerced, even if they did something wrong. It's because even, let's say, if someone hands, God forbid, a person a gun and says, shoot them, that person down the street, or I'll shoot you. Jewish law says that we shouldn't do it. What if a person does do it? They're not responsible for murder. They were coerced. The person said, I'm going to kill you unless you shoot. It would have been laudable and proper if they said, no, I'll take the bullet. But what if they're normal and they said, no, I just want to live, and I hope I don't hurt anybody, but boom. Torah does not hold them responsible because someone was acting through them. And the way the legal commentaries put it, there's a halachic Jewish legal principle that God exempts one who is coerced. This can be understood as follows: an action one does under coercion. What about something for good? If someone coerces you to do something that's absolutely good, it's also it's their mitzvah. Yeah. Exactly. If someone comes along and says, "Give that charity," it's maybe it was my money, but it's a very, very lame mitzvah if it's a mitzvah at all, right?
The Spanish converse of the 1492.
Correct. And they were all accepted as coerced converts. They were not considered disloyal to God. They were forced. An action one does under coercion is not considered that person's action at all. It's as if the act happened on its own or through the other person, and the person isn't regarded as the one who did it. Now that we've established that it's possible, there's this idea where I'm doing it, but physically, but it's not really me. Let's take that to the success. Even after a person reaches a place where they're totally given over to God, text 11a, 163, there's still reality of their own hand, their personal effort. That's why the success God gives flows through the person's hand. It's divine success, which shows up in a way that matches the person's own action and effort. So normally, what we can expect of ourselves is that, of course, we take up space. It's our endeavor. We're working. we do our due diligence, we do the preparation, we put in the effort, we stay up late, then we pray, we give charity, we put up a mezuzah, and we understand that we don't control all the variables. But it's not like we're not, we don't exist. Of course we exist. I'm the one doing it. But God is a very critical partner here giving me success. So there's my hands and God blessing them. That's the way the Torah describes Joseph initially. That he was very successful. He was running the show in Potiphar's house. And it was clearly very unusually smooth. And the Torah says that God gave success to all his efforts, or gave the success to the work of his hands, because it was the work of his hands, but God was blessing it. We're going to say though that there's actually an even deeper level to opening for success, or to even more success, and that's what the Torah says. The next time when he was in prison, it says that God was succeeding, even though it was Joseph doing it. And here, yeah, from the Rebbe 11b, when Joseph was put into prison, being in prison I've never, I visited. Thank God, never been there involuntarily. It was brought out to him it brought out in him a complete loss of self to God. He became like nothing. It's obviously must be a very humiliating, dehumanizing experience. That helped him come to the idea of that I have nothing left. I'm only open to God. That's why the success he experienced came in the form of whatever he did. God was successful. Again, it's not the right translation functionally, but I understand why they're using it here, because it doesn't mention Joseph in that clause. A kind of success where you can see right away that it's not human effort, it's clearly God's hand. Yes, the verse still connects that success to Joseph's own hand and actions. We say whatever he did, God was successful. But because Joseph was in such a state of such deep loss of self, like a prisoner with no personal identity, his hand didn't take up any space at all. So what Joseph did was he had such surrender. It wasn't even though he was doing, he saw himself just as a divine tool, that God is working through him. And therefore, even the verse in the success that Joseph had in prison, it calls it like God was succeeding. What does that mean for us? Oh, excellent. So the success that came through him, I didn't finish, I'm sorry. So the success that came through him wasn't limited by the usual bounds of human effort. It was something entirely godly, beyond nature altogether, to the point that he didn't even sense Joseph's hand anymore. Only God was making it succeed. Because we're totally open to God. We see ourselves, even our efforts, as being just the container for God's blessing. And as the Rebbe says in text 12, the container for such divine success that's beyond nature is, as the verse states, to this I look, to the one who is humble and broken in spirit. In other words, a loss of self. The less a person feels their own ego and sense of self, the more God is with them openly. In their actions, you see more and more of God's strength shining through. Because there's a loss of self. I tell you that, my father, blessed memory, he's a great man and is very successful in many different ways, and a smart man. When I was working with him these past 15 years more in the office in Morristown, as he got older, I really didn't agree with a number of the decisions he was making. He was high 80s, and he was 90 already when he passed away. But and he had cancer and so on. I didn't expect more of him, but just got to run the institution. But he would insist on his way. to the extent that I started removing myself from some conversations because I didn't want to be disrespectful to him and I couldn't handle it. Just do what you got to do. So another someone in the office who's a good friend, but he's now our chief of operations. I used to leave him in there. He said, "You discuss this. I can't do this." And he was, so it doesn't make sense, but okay, we'll do what it does. And I remember it again and again. I still can't explain. I'm just sharing my experiences. The way my father went about it, it worked. And I would speak to this other guy in the office, Shirley, and say, "This is crazy," because now he thinks it made sense. He's going to do it again because there's no. I don't know why it worked. But I mean, literally, once we're doing an event. It was scheduled to be outside, and the forecast was for 100% rain. So you got to do it outside. No, keep it outside. So what do you mean? I can't do it outside. And I had to walk out of the office. And then it didn't rain. So he thinks, see? but yeah, I see that as God was blessing his efforts, was working. Rational, it was not. But it worked. I hope some of that stays in the office. But there is that idea that I believe I've seen myself at some level. Recognizing God as the source of blessing opens us to greater success. And now we'll read the key points. Number one, Joseph is described as someone remarkably successful in whatever he did. Number two, all success, anything positive, is really just a manifestation of God's blessing. True success is when the result exceeds expectation. Okay. To me, I think meeting an expectation could be a success also. It's a good expectation, but whatever. Three, God tasks us with making an effort. The steps we take to realize that success is merely a function of making space for God's blessing to flow. If we truly appreciate this, we completely dissolve into God's efforts and results. And number four, the more we appreciate and internalize this message, the more space we make for that blessing to flow and be realized in our lives. So I don't know if there are any questions. You have a question? Good. Yeah. Say it again. Ishmaelites. Yes. Yeah. No, any Ishmaelite was the descendant of Ishmael. The second question is, I just want to say it again. No. Go ahead. Yeah. Kimchi. Because you don't have in Kemach means flour. So maybe they were flour merchants. Kimchi, there's still kimchis around. Not that many. Okay. Unless there are any questions, wish you all a great week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We'll see you next Sunday, God willing, for Hanukkah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.